Hello friends, Mr. E here, and today we will be talking a lot about the Skitarii. It's more speculation time. This time around, it is not about weapons, because we already did that episode. This is episode 2. It's about abilities. Now, last time, if you missed it, you should go watch the video, but basically I broke down everything we know so far about the Skitarii arsenal, which includes the 6 what I believe to be the exclusive primary and secondary weapons. Not to say there won't be other weaponry of some sort within the arsenal, but I don't believe they will be equipable in the primary and secondary slot where you build your masteries for them. They might just be baked into the actual functions of the class, which I'll get to in a little bit. That is the one thing I did, and the other thing that I looked at is what do we know about how the servo skull works? Because the servo skull seems to be the way that we are using blitzes with this class. So all the blitzes that have been sort of teased so far are through the servo skull. It can shoot a laser pistol, it can shoot a flamethrower. Apparently it can do some sort of Medicae or healing in there, TBD on that one, but some very, very cool prospects there. And of course, like weaponry and your blitzes, that goes a long way towards defining a class and its playstyle. But I think perhaps more important than any of that is what I want to talk about today, which is abilities. Abilities for this class are going to be not only very defining of the way the different class archetypes play, but I think that this class, is so far sort of ahead of the curve, or it's so radically different than anything we've experienced in the game so far. This class has a very sort of thought out and developed ultimate or ability system where allocating additional points in the talent tree can boost your abilities. And it's not like in the similar way to what we have currently where it's like, oh yeah, obviously taking the augment points behind the abilities is going to change it up. There are still augment points behind these abilities that can modify them, but there is a core power concept here. There's an element called core power that can then give a buff to the duration or the power level of the abilities at a baseline. And so you can choose whether you want to invest your talent points into core power and therefore have buffed abilities, or to not, or to just have the baseline ability and let it roll as it is. And so we'll be exploring one of those because we have one of the abilities that has a little bit of a data mine today. We can explore how that looks and what that conceptually might be. We'll also be taking a look at the talent tree and how this is laid out, how it is structured, because it's very interesting, obviously, as a lot of you saw, as well as a few other snippets that we can draw from the dev blog that has been put out by Fat Shark about the making of the Skitarii, because there's a couple of little things in there that I thought were really interesting. And yeah, full disclosure, there is also a few elements that I'll be commenting on from a fellow content creator, Yobi's video. I'll link his video in the description. I think it's a really good video. It's got some good speculation. It's a good little brain teaser. Gets you thinking about the Skitarii. He has one thing he says in there that I definitely disagree with him on, which I'll bring up later, but that's okay. But I also really wanted to thank him for putting together a approximation of what the Skitarii talent tree will look like, so we can actually discuss it in full without having to pan around between 8 different images. They're blurry of the talent tree. So he kudos to him for that. Okay? Thank you very much, Yobi. And yeah, go sub to him. It's a lonely world being a Darktide content creator. We gotta savor the ones we got, guys. So let's begin today. I want to begin with the store page here. I'll put it up in the corner for you, the picture-in-picture. So this is the element that I want to start with, which is talking about the core power systems. Now, this is going to be really, really important to the Skitarii and their abilities, because this core power, as you see here, the Skitarii are zealously devoted to the machine god and equipped with the sacred instruments of precision and destruction to guarantee that every shot finds the mark. Their core power systems fuel a wide array of combat abilities, each accessible at different levels and growing in strength as more core power is allocated to them. So this, you could read this as their core power systems, but it is actually a term. Their core power systems, and they grow as more, so you might as well capitalize this, right? Capital C, capital P. So yeah, we've got core power as a mechanic with this class, and as you allocate more of them, they become accessible at different levels. I don't believe this means different player levels. I think this means different, there are tiers to these abilities. If you've ever played classic World of Warcraft, right, you can level up your skills more, so they do more damage and have greater effects. And I believe that sort of thing is at the mechanic that is at play with this class. And the reason I think that is because we have some data mined information from a while ago. I shared this back when the Ukrainian localization stuff dropped, and it was at the top. Now this is like actually something. I don't understand how this was wrapped in with this. I guess it was just found in part of the same data mine, but this is clearly the description of what I would guess is like the core, the basic combat ability for the class. The class has 3 archetypes, as I have said in a couple videos now. I believe the 3 archetypes are the Skitarii Ranger, the Skitarii Ruststalker, and the Skitarii Vanguard. I think that that's what I'm kind of like locking in on. And this is the Skitarii Ranger, which I believe is the default archetype that you will have if you don't assign any like talent points or whatever. Sort of how, like, you know, if you play as Veteran, you just always have Executioner stance until you take another ability. So this one reads, swap to your secondary weapon. Your weapon locks onto enemies close to your targeting reticle, granting you inhuman accuracy. You gain spread and recoil reduction for its duration. While active, you drain capacitance, which I circled in blue, and it says capacitance keyword, which lets you know this is like going to be a capitalized word within the finalized version of this talent, per second, an additional capacitance per shot. So at first blush, this is a very similar talent description to a talent that the Veteran has called Deadshot. And Deadshot is a talent where if you aim down sights with the weapon, you get a boosted crit rate, and I think like something else like critical or a recoil reduction or something, but it drains a percentage of your stamina per second, and it drains stamina per shot. So this is pretty much like 1-to-1 with that, right? However, it's using this thing called quote-unquote capacitance, and we'll find out what that is in a second. So the ability is disabled if you switch from your secondary weapon, comma, if you reach 0 capacitance and 0 charges, or if you can reactivate it. So the really important one here is this middle one. This can really give us a lot of clues as to how this works. So if you reach 0 capacitance and 0 charges, it will deactivate, right? It'll disable. So that means if you have 0 capacitance, but you don't have and 0 charges, you have at least 1 charge or maybe more, then it must extend the duration of the ability, right? So what we can kind of glean here is that one of these things here, either charges or capacitance, is being scaled by the class's core power, right? That is the mechanic that it is at play here, is investing more core power in this ability is going to either scale your capacitance and going to scale your charge. And my bet here is that capacitance is the functional thing here. I would bet that your capacitance, it's core power, right? Capacitance is a measure of like, it's basically like, you know, your capacity, your energy capacity. It's for batteries. So capacitance is going to be your investment in the core power for the class. And so the more core power you have allocated, the bigger your capacitance bar is. So what I'm imagining is we have a bar, you know, it's like a duration. It's draining downwards like this. When it hits 0, if you have another charge and you want to continue the ability, it expends the charge. But if you use a charge for the ability, for your, which by the way, this ability is basically like auto aim. It's basically like just snaps to heads and shoots in the head John Wick style. This is going to use 1 charge if you press the ability, and if you want to keep it going, if you want to keep it rolling, it'll consume another charge when you run out of capacitance. Or if you bail out early, you consume that 1 charge and your capacitance builds back up, and then the next time you use it, you can start again as well. So that is what I'm thinking in here. And then there's one more thing here. If used at 2 charges or above, gain range cleave and range critical strike chance. So there's extra potential for using this when you've waited a while, right? When you've built up more charges, because charges is something we have in the game already. I believe that charges are going to function just like current game has like charges for the Psyker's shield wall, etc. And the reason that I believe that the operative thing here is that capacitance is because of this image here, which has Victor Magnuson. He's playing with a galvanic rifle, and we can see his ability right down here. So this ability has a couple things going on. First of all, we can tell it's the ability that's talked about in that little bit of a leak because it says abilities. And by the way, I tried to AI upscale this and AI has no fucking clue what it's looking at. But when I look at this, if I zoom out like the right amount and then I kind of squint in the right way, I can read this. I think it's like the human brain being smart in that way. But seeing these sort of patterns, it says abilities HUD, and then it says ability again, and then it says stance. And I at one point when I looked at this, I could make out that word right there. But suffice to say, this is our quote unquote range stance that is going to give us this like range sniping ability. This is the default ability for the class insofar as I can understand. And this down here is the hotkey, obviously for activating it, F. Press F to pay respects. And then 3 is the number of charges this ability has. So yeah, that fits with the concept of charges. And the fact that this is like actually, it's not placeholder or anything, it's literally just charges, lets me know that charges are not something that's like new to the class or whatever. When they're saying charges, it's just going to be, you know, charges like Zealot's Fury of the Faithful can have 2 charges, or the Psyker's Psychonetic Shield can have 2 charges, right? So yeah, we have 3 charges on this ability by default. And what I think that means then is that instead of this class having a duration on this, at least this ability, it has no duration. It has a until you run out of capacitance duration. So you can activate this ability and you have until your capacitance meter runs to 0. And that means that this is, I think, the only ability in the game where you can scale the duration of the ability by investing talent points. You can say, okay, listen, I'm going to go run this talent tree and I'm going to invest 4 of my talent points in making my capacitance super high, which is going to make my ability last forever, right? And that's going to be really, really cool. I think that's like, and that's like the baseline of how obviously there could be a lot of other stuff that's going on here. And the other thing, of course, as we just saw a second ago, as per the description, where was it? As per the description, when you use it 2 charges or above, you gain this buff here. So that means that even if you have like high capacitance, you still have to wait for the cooldown to come up. So you're still encouraged to have cooldown reduction. But more importantly, think about this. If you have a larger capacitance and you use this ability when you're at 2 charges or above, you get a much greater reward because this buff of range cleave and crit chance lasts for longer. So you are incentivized to build capacitance with this. Not only does it last longer, but if you trigger it when it's in this like empowered state, you get an even greater buff. And I think these sort of mechanics where building towards your ability and having like sort of situational triggers where, oh yeah, if you trigger this when it's like really full and nice and juiced up, you're going to get an extra boost. That's really, really cool. Like that, those sort of ideas give me like, you know, just genuinely like give me chills thinking about the possibilities. So that is like very, very awesome. Now, that isn't the only thing that's kind of awesome in this image here. There also is this little guy down here. What the hell's he doing? So yeah, this little guy is quite prominently displayed on a post-it note right on Victor Magnuson's desktop. But, you know, so like, yeah, he looks like he might be some sort of like prototype new enemy for the game, right? But, you know, it could just be an accident that he was included here. Of course, they probably got lots of sketches of like stuff around the old fat shark offices of all these sorts of enemies in their wildest dreams. And, you know, who among us does not have a million sticky notes posted all over their screen? Well, Victor Magnuson, for one, does not have a bunch of sticky notes posted all over his screen. He has exactly one sticky note posted on his screen, and it's this guy, and it's directly in the camera. When they probably, you know, before recording this intentionally, also was playing Diablo 3. Why? But before recording this, they probably very intentionally curated their spaces, you know, so that they didn't have like anything super leaky here. Yeah, they got this guy on here. And this guy is this guy. Look at that. So, I mean, obviously it's been stylized. It's been very much turned into a, you know, like an admonition actual enemy, like for our game, because this guy here is a Nurgle unit. This is what he is, a Chaos Renegade Militia Preacher. So, I mean, let's match the pieces. We're dealing with Chaos, right? We're dealing with a Renegade Militia. and this guy's a preacher. So yeah, I think it fits. I think it's a really, really good fit for, like, you know, sort of the armies that we're facing here. Turns out the renegade militias are already an idea that is explored within the tabletop for Nurgle armies. So yeah, what does this guy do as far as like units in battle? Well, he buffs his allies, obviously. This is a speaker box, and he basically like kind of gives buffs to allies around him. I think an enemy like this, and I said this before when they had a radio operator enemy in the game who was a gunner with a radio backpack on that could summon enemies. An enemy like that could be a really, really fundamental, like, good buff to the feel of Darktide. As many of you know, I've been on a bit of a tear lately, ranting about how Darktide has just become a mile a minute, bowl over the enemies, don't stop for anything, don't even care what the enemies are doing, just blow everything up, yada yada, sort of a slop fest. And an enemy like this sort of like implies that we might be able to slow the game down. If you now have enemies that you aren't just going to be able to bowl over because those enemies are being constantly healed, or they have some massive like damage reduction buff, or they are stagger immune, or whatever it is, and you have to tactically remove this guy first, or you have to coordinate such that, like, you know, the preacher is stopped from doing his thing. Those are the sorts of meaningful like combat decisions that I think Darktide is really lacking, because right now you really only have like melee dudes and range dudes, and then there's a couple of specials that force you out of your comfort zone, force you to do anything. But for things like mutants and dogs, they just come right at you and you just continue doing what you're doing and beat them down, turn them into a pulp. Even the trapper like just runs directly at you, so you don't have to do anything. But as far as enemies that really force you to engage in a different playstyle, that force you to play by their rules, we have a very select handful in the game. So the sniper, and the bombers are the ones I would pick on here, because those guys can stay well out of range, but they can threaten your safety in a zone. They can say you cannot camp in there anymore because now it's filled with toxic gas and you're going to die, and all the enemies are super buffed as well. So if an enemy like this was added to Darktide, this could like mess with the default way the game is played for players, because now you have to strategize around, we need to remove the preacher from the battlefield. We need to remove the preachers from the battlefield. Otherwise, the enemies are going to get turbo buffed all the time. And I love that. I love that. So that is something I'm really, really hopeful for. New enemies like this. Obviously, we have the Vanguard, the two shield type enemies that are coming with this update. And that, to me, like, this looks super intentional. I don't know about you guys, but this does not look unintentional. This looks like, hey, little teaser there for you. Right dead center of frame, and a couple shots here that, yeah, this little guy might be making a feature appearance later in the year. So that's really cool. Okay, so that was a fun little detour talking about that guy. You know, he's not coming with this patch, there's no way, but, you know, maybe in the fall or the winter we will be seeing that enemy, and plus some more. You know, that would be really, really cool if we got a big push to our army. Now, while I'm still on this page with Victor here, this is one where I did want to point something out in case Yobi is watching. So he says at some point during his clip that we are for certain getting taser goads, and he was like pointing out that this here is a taser goad because it's long. At least I think that's what he was trying to imply. But I think with my higher resolution screenshot here, you can clearly see that this is just placeholder text. This is, and it doesn't say taser goad or anything. And you can tell also that it's not a long like taser goad or anything. That in fact, what it is the text for the thing. Because you see right there, it says galvanic rifle. I mean, very clearly it says galvanic rifle. Now I can't quite read that, but yeah, it's something. But what I also wanted to point out here is that bound on G here, G is your grenade key by default, and that to me is a bolter. So so we have 3 blitzes for this little skull drone thing, or 3 sort of things you can do. The default, I believe, is the laser. Then it has, as we saw in the trailer, it has a bolter, like a bolt pistol. I think it's got a bolter. I think that's what one of them is. And then the flamethrower. Those are the 3 weapons it can have. And then I think that maybe the 3rd blitz ability is going to be the Medicae servitor drone. And of course, I think all the drones will probably share some functionalities as far as their ability to like hack and interact with stuff. But yeah, that's pretty cool that we can glean that from it. I just unfortunately had to ran the parade of that. That is not unfortunately a taser goad. I don't exactly know where Taser Goad is going to come into things. They very clearly say electrified goads, which seems crazy they wouldn't include it. But yeah, no, so far there's no like actual evidence of that coming into play. Now let's go over to that's now that I'm done pointing out why Yobi's wrong. Let's go over to his talent tree spreadsheet here. Thank you, Yobi, for putting this together. Really cool. It does have one minor error that I noticed though, which is that also these are connected right here, but not a big deal. So what we want to show here, or what I want to show here, is to me as a talent tree, talent building sort of guy, this tree is awesome. This tree is so fascinating and holds so much potential. The reason this tree is potentially so great and so powerful and has so many possibilities is because of the minimum requirements. So this is something that had very much limited a lot of classes for a long time. Ogren was a big sufferer of this until his rework, partial rework, Veteran as well. So the problem with a lot of builds in Darktide right now is that they have a minimum requirement in order to get to the stuff that like kind of fundamentally makes the build work. And then there's really not that many other points to play around with. So let me show you, for example, the Veteran here. So the Veteran, let me do like a little build editor for the Veteran. The Veteran has certain requirements for his builds, right? In order to play most Veteran builds, you will need 11 talent points to get to your first ability, which is of course Shout, right? You'll need 11 talent points to get to Shout, and you'll take 12 because this is guaranteed, like mandatory with Shout. So you've already lost 12 out of your 30 talent points. From there, it's almost a guarantee that you will take Tactical Awareness. So now you are halfway done with all of your talent points, and you've really not gotten to choose anything. This is all you have to take it. And there's, obviously you can make choices up here, like go left or right and like choose up here, but most of the time you will take additional stuff and not like less. Then in terms of getting a keystone, getting any keystone, so if I did this, like for a pretty efficient keystone pickup, I'm at 18 talent points. I only have 12 talent points left, which is very few. And basically, the more of a class's power that is tied up in certain like must-have talent nodes, the less they have to experiment with. So for instance, for the Veteran, most people, well, you wouldn't take this, but you would take this instead. But most people will probably take these grenades here. And then most people will probably come over here and take weak spot and ammo, right? So now we're at 23. Well, if you're running a recon lasgun build or any sort of lasgun build, you're 100% taking shock trooper. So now we're at 25, right? So just a basic run-of-the-mill focus target with no add-ons, shock trooper Veteran with some grenades. I have 5 points left to experiment with, which, what does that mean fundamentally? How different can your builds really be, right? There's really not that much room to play around. So just keep in mind that in order to just get your ability, it takes 11 levels, 11 talent points just to get your ability, and it takes 18 to get your focus target, or it takes you 17 to get to focus target or the first keystone for the Veteran. Now let's go back to this talent tree and show what those minimum requirements are, because this is where the potentials start to give me like legitimately chills. So if I want to get to any ability from my starting point, it takes me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 levels. I immediately have an ability at level 5, or I can't remember how leveling works in Darktide, but yeah, within 5 levels, I have an ability. If I want to put a keystone with that, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more points. So at level 10, I have an ability and a keystone. And this, the ability plus keystone combo is generally like the second really big power spike for a class, right? So when you're playing a class, whether it be the Veteran or whether it be the Zealot or something, right? Where's the Zealot? There's a Zealot. Starts with a Z, right? Whether it be the Zealot as well, your first big power spike generally occurs when you reach your ability, because it like is way better than the default ability. And even for the Zealot, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 points to get to your ability. And that's your first big power spike. And then from there, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, we're back at 16 talent points to get to your keystone, or more if you're going for a different keystone, right? So like, in order to just have the fundamentals of your class online for your first and second big power spikes, you have to invest half the talent points that you have. And then from there, like, there's more and more must-have talents that just, the game isn't, your class isn't going to work without them. So you're just basically mandated in taking them. And that's something that this build here, or this design here, really like gives you tons of freedom around. So yeah, with this layout, I have to only spend 10 points and I can get an ability and a keystone. And now I have 20 points to play around with. Now I have 20 points, and note that you don't have to take an aura. Auras are way the fuck out here, right? And here's like the blitzes, like the blitz groupings. So I'm guessing that there's a default blitz of the las pistol that just shoots some las pistol. That's probably like just kind of how the service skull is. And then you can add these in if you want to do the Medicaid one, or the bolter one, or the flamethrower one. That would be my guess is how this is going to work. Or you can just say, fuck it, I don't care about the blitz, the stupid service skull. It doesn't do enough. Skipping it entirely. Pass. No waste of talent points there at all. And there's one other really notable thing about this talent tree that I'm certain you have probably picked out on. These nodes here. So these nodes here, I believe these are your core power, aka capacitance. I believe that these are those nodes that you allocate to make your abilities more powerful. Reason being, they're the same shape as the abilities. They are just like mini ability things. So to me, that says these are ability augments. They work in tandem with the abilities, and they're placed all over the map. So in order to like really juice your ability, you could, if you're going for, it's kind of like theory craft, a minimalist build here. If you're going for this build here, 5 points to the ability, and now you could take 6 points and you get a little bit of a jump. You've got 1 extra capacitance for the ability. And with just 7 or 2 more points, so 8 points, you could take these 2. And then maybe you wanted to invest 3 more here at 11 points. And 2 more here, so 13 points, and now we have a lot of capacitance. We have 4 additional capacitance, 4 additional core power allocated to this ability. Nice and juicy, very nice ability. Probably takes some augments, right? So you can spend about half your points getting this all juiced up. So this is the sort of thing that really just kind of like excites me, is thinking about like, okay, if this ability is really good and I want to push it really far, if I want to give it the maximal juice, then I can instead of saying like I want more basic passives that will benefit my class and how it plays on a moment to moment, I can invest my power in when my power is active, when my ability is active, it's going to go hard. And so I could have a build where I take all of the augments here. So that's what this is: 8, 9, 10, or sorry. Yeah, that's 8. So that's 8 points. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then we'll go 17, 18, 19. Okay, so I got 19 points spent, and I've got all of the capacitance in the tree, and I've got all the things here. So now I want to also get a keystone. So I'm betting this one down here is really good. It looks good to me. So let's go 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I just want those 2. Those are the good ones. These 2 are S tier. These are D tier. That was 25, right? Then let's get a blitz. So 26, 27, 28, just that node, by the way. And then I've got 3 more. Because, by the way, auras are all the way out here. So I bet they're probably really good because like you can only get them, you don't have to get them. So we'll go 29, 30. There you go. That's the build. So there you go. This is the Mr. E. I'm making the first known Skitarii build. This is it right here. This is the meta established right now. So I'm going to be making this build as soon as I get access to it, day 1. I'll put this build up on the channel. We'll see what the fuck it is. I have no idea what these talents actually do, but wouldn't it be funny if this was actually good in any way, shape, or form? And that just seems like a lot of fun. So I'll have to screenshot this, or I'm going to screenshot it right now, and we're going to remember that for later. Fun. Okay, so that is what I wanted to showcase there. It opens up a world of potentials for the class. Hopefully you can see that, is that there's just so much there. And then finally, speaking of potentials, let's talk about these abilities themselves. What might they do? We'll come full circle back to where we started. And so here we are back on that first page we looked at, and let's talk about these abilities. This is the information we have right now. This is, pretty much what everyone's drawing from when they're thinking about it. So the first one is pretty dead set what we've already seen. Whether you envision your Skitarii as a ruthless long-range assassin with deadly aim, so deadly, that's being our one we've already seen right here, with our swapping to secondary weapon, etc., then a frenzied servant of the Omnissiah, carving through flesh with a transonic blade, or a walking storm with living electricity. So this second one here is very clearly Skitarian Ruststalker coded, and this might be like complete copium or hopium or whatever you want to call it, delusion, but it says carving through flesh with a transonic blade and not transonic razor or transonic sword, which are the two actual names of the exclusive weapons we're getting. It also is a capital T, lowercase b, transonic blade. So here's my thoughts. If I could kind of spitball as to what this ability might be. I think that this ability is going to be something to do with going fast, obviously. The Skitarian Ruststalkers are melee combatants, right? They need to get in close in melee. We do not need another ability in the game that gives you a big steroid boost to your damage or attack speed when you're in melee. There's so many of those already, right? So a Rampage, Fury of the Faithful, right? We don't need another ability as well that is a charge ability that goes straight forward in the line real fast, that can zoom in on one enemy or bowl them over or whatever, because there's already 3 of those. And this ability, though, it does need to operate for melee, and it does need to be aggressive. So my thoughts here are that this ability is going to be a sprint as an engage. So it's like either you go down on all fours or you just enter into a full tilt sprint forward. You can control yourself left to right, but you have your power meter, right? You have your capacitance. And at the end of this sprint, or whenever you choose to end it, you strike. And you strike not with your melee weapon. Maybe you can strike with your melee weapon if you want, but at least I think that there is going to be an augment here, or some part of it, where you can replace your hand with a cord claw, where this is where the cord claw is in the sort of renders, the art sort of show things they were showing in the dev blog. I think that there is a cord claw, because cord claws are very much affiliated with the Skitarian Ruststalkers. I think that you can lash out with a cord claw at the terminus of your charge. So you will sprint forward, and then you can sprint for however long your capacitance holds out, and then at the culmination of it, you one good slash on wherever you land, and that can be a really, really powerful strike. So this would obviously work really well with scaling your capacitance, because then you can just sprint for longer. You can have this be a super, super long distance, move through the environment. Perhaps there's even dodging and stuff wrapped into it, so that you can evade gunfire while you're doing it. It could also be used as a disengage. Also, of course, these abilities are still probably going to be tied to cooldowns, right? They're still going to have to be only used certain, X amount of times per minute, and that will be the limiting factor. So having a higher capacitance, maybe having whatever capacitance you have left is then drained and dropped into the enemy, something like that. But my guess is that this is a hyper aggressive engaging sort of tool, where we are getting into the fray, and perhaps even has a cord claw strike that has some sort of special properties as far as rending, kind of similar to Fury of the Faithful, I guess, in that sense, but with freedom of movement associated with it as well, so to really keep you being agile as a fighter. So that's my thoughts about what we could be seeing there with that frenzied servant carving through flesh with the transonic blade. And then finally, we have the walking storm of living electricity, which I'm still, I think, going to say that this is just going to be the Skitarii Vanguard, given that we've seen pictures of them rendering the Skitarii Vanguard. They've done quite a bit of art of this. I think it's one of the very most recognizable Skitarii sort of units, and it is also a wielder of the Arc Maul, of the Power Sword. All these weapons are used within the Vanguard, and of course they do have power armor, right? They do have power armor. So I'm thinking that they are having that armor channel this electrical storm around them. They are going to be the electrical controller types who are going to be shocking and stunning and all that good stuff. It's pretty obvious to me, at least, how that walking Storm of Living Electricity means it's just going to be a radius around your character is now going to be dealing damage, right? It's going to be dealing damage, it's going to be electrifying enemies, and then therefore it not only is your ability going to have a cooldown that you obviously want to spec for cooldown, but it's going to last longer, maybe even be more damaging if you have a larger capacitance. So you'll invest more capacitance in order to have that storm be going for longer, and therefore your every ability cast is worth more, which is really cool. So yeah, we'll see how that shapes out. I believe that is sort of like, at least to me right now, those would be like the obvious choices for this. The one that I'm like very much curious about is like how will they differentiate the ultimate there for the Skitarii and Ruststalker. It remains to be seen. Maybe there's like a temporary stealth, but we already have so many stealth engagers and we already have so many charge engagers. It has to be something a little bit different. I really, really want that cord call to come into play there. And maybe even that is also like where the taser goad comes in. Maybe like, you know, when you are playing as a Vanguard, if you activate your ability, you like can just whip out a taser goad and shoot people. But yeah, that's I don't know. That's TBD there. But that's all I had to speculate on today, guys. Hopefully get you excited, get you thinking about this stuff. I am just super jazzed about this talent tree because it is crazy. Like this stuff is just so juicy to think about the potentials for that, and you know, we're just in less than a month now. Skitarii almost this month, guys. So keep optimistic out there. I'll see you real soon. Mr. Reality here. Bye bye.